The Caribbean is a tinderbox.
From north to south, from east to west, which must be an impregnable homeland. Let no one mess with Venezuela.
The warm Caribbean waters turned deadly when two Venezuelan F-16 fighter jets dove toward the USS Jason Dunham in an aggressive low-altitude flyover.
He has offered everything because he doesn't want to f*** around with the United States.
But this aerial confrontation was just the boiling point of something far more shocking.
Well, I would say they're going to be in trouble if they fly in a dangerous position. You or your captains can make the decision as to what they want to do.
American missiles had been systematically destroying boats in international waters, killing 27 people in 6 weeks.
They have faster boats. I mean, they're world-class speedboats, but they're not faster than missiles.
What happened in those fateful moments rewrote the rules of international conflict. How did drug interdiction escalate into the Caribbean's most dangerous military crisis in decades?
We will treat you like we have treated Al-Qaeda. We will find you, we will map your networks, we will hunt you down, and we will kill you.
A tinderbox of history. To understand the feud between Venezuela and the United States, you can't rely on a map alone. You have to read the calendar and the headline pages going back decades. The confrontations that shocked the world in September and October did not arrive out of nowhere. It was the flash at the end of a long burn, the moment when old grudges, political moves, and raw fear finally met. At the heart of the fight are two opposite views about power and who should run a country. On one side is Chavismo, the movement born with Hugo Chavez that casts the United States as an imperial bully. It says foreign powers are always trying to control Latin America, and that domestic politics must push back hard. On the other side is a steady Washington view that leaders like Nicolas Maduro wreck economies, silence opponents, and threaten regional stability. Those beliefs are more than policy. They are deep stories that shape how both sides act. The split widened into open conflict during Donald Trump's second term. His team hit hard at criminal networks in the region, labeling some groups as terrorist organizations and tightening legal pressure. Accusations piled up. One gang, Tren de Aragua, was named a terror group, and whispers, later sharpened into allegations, tied the Cartel de los Soles to figures inside the Venezuelan state. That was more than a law enforcement move. It read like a legal judgment against the regime itself. Then came a step that felt like a personal attack. In March 2020, the U.S. Justice Department indicted Maduro on narco-terrorism charges and placed a $15 million bounty on his capture, the same amount offered for Osama bin Laden after 9/11. Offering a reward for a sitting president did something that rarely happens in modern statecraft. It turned diplomacy into a public, humiliating challenge. For Maduro and his supporters, it looked like a threat to life and rule. For many Venezuelans, it became a reason to rally. Inside Venezuela, life was collapsing. Shortages of food and medicine fed anger and fear. In that setting, talk of an outside enemy can bind people together. Maduro used those fears, recruiting the Bolivarian militia and framing the crisis as an invasion by proxy. He pointed to American warships and said the nation had to defend itself. That shift tore at a long-standing regional promise. Latin America and the Caribbean once prided themselves on being a zone of peace, a place where disputes were handled at tables, not with guns. As strikes, threats, and naval moves rose, diplomats watched that idea crumble. Small nations saw their neighborhood turn from a zone of cautious calm into a possible front line for a wider global rivalry. The result is ugly and uncertain. Trust between governments has been shredded. The rules that once limited the use of force at sea and respected sovereignty are fraying. For everyday people on both sides, politics is now scarier, full of bigger risks and fewer safe bets. If this moment is a turning point, it is because choices were made that change what counts as acceptable power. Once force is used freely, it becomes harder to put the lid back on. The region may face years of harder borders, sharper rhetoric, and a steady erosion of the quiet that once defined it. The cost will not only be political, it will be human. And those consequences will be felt long after headlines move on. Leaders now face a clear choice: double down on force and risk wider war, or step back and build new rules through honest talks, independent oversight, and accountable investigations. The easy route may seem tempting, but it will cost far more later indeed. Titans of the Sea. By late August 2025, Venezuela faced the largest American naval deployment in Caribbean waters in decades. 4,000 Marines, guided missile destroyers, and amphibious assault ships assembled just off the coast. The official mission? Counter narcotics. The real capability? Regime change in 48 hours. At the heart of this fleet was a group of ships called the Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group. Think of this as the Marines' mobile base. It was led by the USS Iwo Jima, a massive ship that looks like a small aircraft carrier. It doesn't just carry helicopters, it carries thousands of Marines, along with all their landing craft and equipment. They were supported by other transport ships, like the USS San Antonio and USS Fort Lauderdale. Together, they represented a floating city of over 4,000 sailors and Marines, a clear signal that America was prepared for anything, from a rescue operation to a full-scale invasion. But the real stars of our story are two specific warships: the destroyer and the cruiser. These are the hunters, the guardians, and the sharpshooters of the sea. First, let's talk about the USS Jason Dunham. This is an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, a name that sounds complicated but simply means it's one of the most deadly and versatile ships ever built. It's over 500 feet long, packed with enough technology to seem like science fiction. Its brain is called the Aegis Combat System, a powerful radar and computer system that can track hundreds of targets, from enemy jets to incoming missiles, all at once, in the air, on the sea, and under the water. Its weaponry is even more impressive. Lined up in the center of the ship are 96 missile tubes, a vertical launch system that's like a Swiss Army knife for war. It can fire missiles to swat airplanes out of the sky, missiles to hunt submarines deep below the waves, and even long-range Tomahawk missiles that can strike targets hundreds of miles inland. For closer threats, it has a rapid-fire 5-inch cannon and a last-ditch weapon called the close-in weapon system, a Gatling gun that can shred an incoming missile just seconds before impact. This was the ship, a floating titan of war, that was on station in the region as of October 14, 2025. Then there was the USS Lake Erie. This ship, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, is like the Jason Dunham's bigger, more powerful cousin. It has the same incredible Aegis system and a similar arsenal of missiles, but it's often used as a command ship, the quarterback calling the plays for the whole fleet. The Lake Erie's journey to this crisis tells you how important this mission was. It had just returned from a long deployment in the Pacific, but it didn't get to stay home for long. By the end of August, it was already off the coast of Mexico. Then, in a crucial strategic move, it squeezed through the Panama Canal and entered the Caribbean on August 30th. This wasn't a casual cruise. This was a deliberate, calculated move to put one of the Navy's most capable strike platforms right into the brewing storm. Where the Jason Dunham was a brilliant bodyguard, the Lake Erie was the precise sniper rifle. capable of launching a devastating strike from far over the horizon. And floating quietly among these giants was a mysterious vessel called the MV Ocean Trader. It looked like an ordinary commercial cargo ship, with no naval markings, but this ghost ship was actually a secret base for Special Operations Forces. Its presence meant that the U.S. wasn't just preparing for a head-on fight. It was ready for the shadowy, secret war that happens out of the public eye. But having the most powerful fleet wasn't enough. The mission required a new policy, one that would shock the international community and rewrite engagement rules that had stood for decades. This was the wall of steel that Venezuela faced. It was a force designed to project power, to dominate the seas, and to deliver a shocking level of violence if ordered. The stage was no longer just set. The main actors had arrived, and they were armed to the teeth. Venezuela's Navy and narco boats. Now, let's look at the other side of the coin. If the U.S. Navy was Goliath, a towering giant of technology and firepower, what did Venezuela have to throw at it? The answer is a tale of two very different fleets, the official Navy and the shadowy, unofficial one. First, you have the official Venezuelan Navy, known as the Armada Bolivariana. They operate patrol boats with names like the Gavion class and Guayquerí class. These are capable ships, but think of them as local police cars compared to the U.S. military's armored tanks. They are smaller, designed mostly for coastal defense, and their job is to patrol Venezuela's own waters. They are not built to sail out and challenge a guided missile destroyer on the open ocean. In a head-to-head fight with a ship like the USS Jason Dunham, they wouldn't stand a chance. But in modern conflict, a direct fight isn't always how things play out. This is where the second, more shadowy fleet comes in. This is the asymmetric threat, a military term for when a weaker opponent uses clever, unexpected tactics to annoy a stronger one. In this case, that meant the fleet of narco boats. These aren't warships. They are what are known on the street as go-fast boats or flipper-type speedboats. Picture a sleek, low-slung speedboat, about 39 feet long, the length of a large bus. But this bus is built for one thing only: speed and stealth. Its power comes from not one, but 4 massive 200-horsepower outboard engines. That's like strapping the engines of 8 powerful sports cars to a single hull. This lets them slice through the water at incredible speeds. They are designed to be hard to see and hard to catch. They sit low in the water, giving them a minimal radar signature. To a radar operator on a distant ship, they might look like a wave or a small fishing boat, easily lost in the clutter of the sea. They are the mosquitoes to the U.S. Navy's Eagle, tiny, annoying, and difficult to swat. These boats don't launch from fancy naval bases. They slip out from quiet coastal villages like San Juan de Unare, a community that has been transformed over the years. Once a traditional fishing village, it became a strategic hub for moving illegal cargo. For the young men in these towns, navigating these fast boats became a way of life. A dangerous but potentially lucrative job in an economy with few other opportunities. This is where the story gets tangled. The U.S. government claimed these boats were operated by members of Tren de Aragua, a criminal organization Washington had designated as a terrorist group. This designation transformed suspected smugglers into legitimate military targets under the new policy. But from the perspective of the villages on the Venezuelan coast, the view was very different. The people on those boats weren't faceless terrorists. They were sons, brothers, and fathers from the community. The U.S. saw a military objective. The villagers saw a tragedy waiting to happen. This fundamental clash of perspectives, one seeing a lawful strike, the other seeing a brutal attack on their people, is what made the coming confrontation so volatile and so tragic. Maduro mobilizes the nation. While the world focused on warships and fighter jets, the real story of Venezuela's response was unfolding on dusty soccer fields and in sweltering town squares. The confrontation with the United States was no longer just a job for the professional military, the FANB. It was becoming a people's war. And the face of this new front line was not a seasoned soldier, but people like Edith Perales, a 42-year-old community organizer who now spent her weekends learning to fire a rifle. Following the first U.S. strike, President Nicolas Maduro made a strategic and dramatic decision. He signed a decree officially ordering the National Bolivarian Armed Forces to begin intensive training of the country's vast civilian militias. These groups, known as the Bolivarian Militia, were originally founded by Hugo Chavez as a grassroots defense force. Now, they were being activated on a massive scale. The mission was simple: transform ordinary citizens into a guerrilla force capable of defending the homeland from what state television called the invading empire. For Edith, this meant her life was split in two. During the week, she was a mother managing a small grocery stall. But on Saturdays, she stood in formation, learning drill commands and weapons handling from active duty soldiers. The training was rudimentary: aging rifles, practice with wooden sticks before touching real guns. But the message was powerful. The government was telling her, and millions like her, that the nation's survival depended on their willingness to fight. This was a masterstroke in asymmetric warfare. The U.S. Navy could track a warship, but how do you track a grandmother who is also a part-time guerrilla? Maduro's strategy was to make a potential invasion so messy, so costly, and so bloody that the U.S. would never dare attempt it. He was raising a human wall of millions. The professional FANB would handle the conventional threat, but the militias would become an unstoppable resistance, blurring the lines between soldier and civilian entirely. This mobilization did more than just boost troop numbers. It solidified Maduro's political position. By handing a rifle to Edith Perales, he was binding her fate to his own. Defending the nation now meant defending his government. The external threat from the north became the perfect tool to unite a divided country and quash internal dissent. The world saw a naval blockade, but inside Venezuela, a different kind of fortress was being built. One made not of steel, but of people.
U.S. military officials are exploring various options to target drug traffickers in Venezuela. Any strike inside Venezuela would represent a sharper turn in the Trump administration's use of force against purported drug targets, escalating tensions with the country's leadership.
The first shot, September 2nd, 2025. 11 men aboard a speedboat in international waters were vaporized by a missile fired from beyond the horizon. No warning, no boarding, no arrest. The United States had just executed its new doctrine, and it posted the strike video on social media. The spark that lit the fuse was a single, unassuming speedboat, cutting through the international waters of the southern Caribbean. High above that boat, silently watching from the thin, cold air, was a U.S. Navy P-8A Poseidon. This isn't just any airplane, it's a sophisticated surveillance platform, a military version of a Boeing 737 packed with the most advanced spy technology in the world. Its powerful radars can scan thousands of square miles of ocean, peering through darkness and weather. Its sensors can listen to electronic chatter and identify a vessel from miles away. On that day, the crew inside the P-8A was watching one specific target, a flipper-type speedboat that had departed from the Venezuelan village of San Juan de Unare. According to U.S. intelligence, this wasn't just any boat. It was following a known drug trafficking route, and it was allegedly packed with narcotics and operated by members of the Tren de Aragua, a group the U.S. now officially considers a terrorist organization. For the commanders watching the P-8's feed, this was the moment of decision. The old way of doing things involved sending a Coast Guard cutter to intercept, board, and arrest suspects. That was no longer the plan. The new policy, authorized from the very top, was far more direct. The boat was not seen as a law enforcement problem. It was now a military target. The order was given: engage and destroy. The weapon of choice was a precision missile. While the Pentagon has not officially disclosed which vessel fired the missile, the USS Lake Erie's position and missile capabilities make it the probable launch platform. From a distance of many miles, far over the horizon and completely unseen by the men on the boat, a missile was launched. What happened next was swift, clinical, and brutal. The missile found its mark. In a sudden, violent explosion, the speedboat was torn apart. There was no chase, no warning shot, no attempt to disable the engines. The strategy was total destruction. All 11 men on board were killed instantly. They never knew what hit them. No attempt was made to recover bodies or debris. No physical evidence of narcotics was presented to the public. The announcement came not through a dry military press release, but directly from the president. Donald Trump took to his social media platform to declare the strike a success. He stated the vessel was loaded with narcotics and that 11 narco-terrorists had been killed. To prove his point, he did something unprecedented. He posted a video of the attack for the whole world to see. There, in clear footage, was the small boat, and then the sudden fiery explosion that consumed it. It was a powerful, shocking piece of propaganda meant to showcase a new era of tough action. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was even more blunt, stating plainly, "Instead of interdicting it on the president's orders, we blew it up, and it'll happen again." The message was chilling in its simplicity. This was not a one-off event. It was a new doctrine.
US President Donald Trump is weighing options for carrying out military strikes targeting drug cartels operating inside Venezuela, including possible strikes within the country.
Aerial brinkmanship. 48 hours after the first kill, Venezuela delivered its answer. Not with words, but with American-made F-16 fighters diving toward a U.S. destroyer in what the Pentagon called a highly provocative mock attack run. For 90 seconds, the Caribbean stood on the edge of war. On September 4th, the situation escalated in a way that shocked military analysts. This was no longer about chasing drug boats. This was a direct state-to-state military challenge. The incident began when 2 Venezuelan Air Force F-16 fighter jets scrambled from their base. Their target was the USS Jason Dunham, the very same guided missile destroyer that was a symbol of the American Armada parked in international waters. What happened next was a deliberate show of force. The 2 Venezuelan jets did not fly by at a safe, respectful distance. They dove down low, screaming toward the American warship at high speed. They conducted an aggressive, low-altitude flyover, buzzing the destroyer so closely that the crew on deck would have felt the roar of the engines and seen the details of the planes with their own eyes. This wasn't a casual flight, it was an unmistakable show of force, a classic military maneuver designed to intimidate and test an opponent's resolve. Inside the USS Jason Dunham, alarms would have blared. The peaceful routine of a patrol was shattered instantly. The crew rushed to battle stations, a well-rehearsed dance of survival. Sailors scrambled to their posts, sealing hatches and preparing for the worst. The ship's most advanced systems snapped to life. Its powerful Aegis radar would have locked onto the approaching jets, tracking their every move. The fire control systems, the computers that guide its missiles and guns, were almost certainly aimed at the F-16s. For those tense minutes, the sailors on the Jason Dunham weren't drug interdiction officers. They were warriors on the brink of combat, their fingers hovering over triggers that could ignite a much larger war. One wrong move, one misinterpreted signal, and a missile could have been launched. The Venezuelan F-16s were Block 15 variants. sold to Venezuela by the United States in the 1980s during friendlier relations. Now, those same aircraft, maintained with black market parts after U.S. sanctions cut off official support, were being used to challenge their original manufacturer. The irony wasn't lost on either side. From Venezuela's perspective, this daring flight was a necessary message. It was their way of saying, "We are not afraid. We see your warships, and we have the capability and the courage to confront them." They were demonstrating that they would not be bullied, that their sovereignty meant more than the technological superiority of the U.S. Navy. It was a desperate but calculated gamble, showing that even David had a sling. The United States' response was not to back down, but to double down. The Trump administration saw the F-16 buzz not as a plea for respect, but as a dangerous escalation that required an overwhelming answer. Within days, the strategic picture in the Caribbean changed dramatically. The U.S. announced the deployment of 10 F-35 Joint Strike Fighters to the region. If the Venezuelan F-16s were considered advanced in their day, the F-35s were from another planet. These are fifth-generation stealth fighters, virtually invisible to radar, with sensor technology that can see and destroy enemies long before they are even seen themselves. Sending them was like bringing a laser sword to a knife fight. It was a clear signal to Caracas: your vintage jets are obsolete. Any further aerial provocation will be met with crushing dominance. The second shot. The F-16 flyover was a message. America's response was more missiles. 6 weeks after the first strike, President Trump posted another kill video on social media. 6 more dead. The new doctrine had become routine. The United States had established a pattern, and it was a pattern of fire and steel. The world had hoped the aerial confrontation would be a wake-up call, a moment for both sides to step back. Instead, it simply cemented a dangerous new status quo. 6 weeks after the first shot was fired, on October 14th, President Trump took to his social media platform once again. The announcement was chillingly familiar. The U.S. military, he stated, had conducted another strike on a boat off the coast of Venezuela. This time, 6 people were killed. In his post, he said intelligence had confirmed the vessel was trafficking narcotics and was associated with illicit narco-terrorist networks. As he had done before, he posted a video, a stark aerial clip showing the small boat being obliterated by a missile in international waters. The message was clear. This was now standard procedure. With this strike, the human cost became impossible to ignore. This is at least the 5th U.S. strike announced in a matter of weeks. The Pentagon reported another operation in early October. The first attack on September 2nd killed 11 people. 2 further strikes on September 15th and 16th each left 3 dead. A 4th strike on October 3rd, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said, killed 4 people aboard that vessel. Adding October 14th's attack brings the confirmed death toll to 27. Trump and other officials argue the airstrikes are necessary to stop narco-terrorists from delivering deadly shipments to the United States. But key details remain unclear. Who was aboard those small boats, what cargo they held, and where they were bound? While U.S. forces routinely interdict suspected drug trafficking vessels at sea as part of counter-narcotics operations, the latest strike is likely to further inflame tensions with Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro and revive questions over the legal basis for Washington's actions. The new Cold War. The confrontation between the Venezuelan patrol boats and the U.S. Navy destroyer was more than just a dramatic clash. It was a quake that sent shockwaves across the entire globe, reshaping the political landscape and leaving everyone wondering what on earth happens next. The world watches, holding its breath, as the Caribbean becomes the center of a crisis that nobody saw coming, but that everyone now has to deal with. The first place to see the fallout was the United Nations Security Council. An emergency meeting revealed a world deeply divided. The United States stood firm, defending its actions as a necessary self-defense against drugs flooding its borders. But the voices of condemnation were loud and powerful. Russia openly questioned if the massive U.S. naval buildup was preparation for an invasion and criticized the cowboy principle of shoot first. China called the strikes a violation of basic human rights and a threat to freedom of navigation. Meanwhile, smaller nations, like Guyana, mourned the death of the Caribbean's long-cherished identity as a zone of peace. The region, once a quiet neighbor, was now the main stage for a dangerous geopolitical showdown. What truly shocked everyone was not just one event, but the breathtaking speed and scale of the escalation. In a matter of weeks, the situation spiraled from a single missile strike on a suspect boat to a near-state-level military conflict, complete with fighter jets buzzing warships. The second major shock was the fierce domestic legal battle inside the United States itself. The sight of Senator Rand Paul, a libertarian Republican from Kentucky known for opposing military interventionism, leading a legislative effort to strip the president of strike authority, revealed profound national divisions over the legality of the operations and the morality of this new war. The precedent set is terrifying in its simplicity. For the first time, a superpower has decided that drug traffickers are not criminals to be arrested, but enemy combatants to be killed on the battlefield. A battlefield that it has declared in international waters. This erodes decades of international law and norms about sovereignty and the use of force. The question now haunts every capital. If America can do this off the coast of Venezuela, what stops another powerful country from doing the same somewhere else? For its own definition of a terrorist? This brings us to the most dangerous shock of all, the potential for a catastrophic miscalculation. We are now in a situation where a single mistake, a nervous sailor, a misread radar signal, a pilot flying too close, could trigger a shot being fired in anger between U.S. and Venezuelan forces. That single shot could ignite a conventional war that neither government claims to want, but that both are now postured for. The Caribbean has become a tinderbox, and everyone is holding a match. Looking forward, the paths are narrow and fraught with risk. One path is a grim continuation of the current cycle. U.S. strikes, followed by Venezuelan protests and military posturing. A slow burn conflict with a steady, tragic body count. Another, darker path is that accidental engagement we all fear. A spark that leads to a full-blown war. The only peaceful path is the most difficult. A diplomatic de-escalation. This would require back-channel talks, face-saving compromises, and a willingness to step back from the brink. But with so much pride and principle on the line, diplomacy feels like the longest shot of all. The new rules of engagement in the Caribbean. The smoke has cleared for now. The U.S. warships maintain their watchful patrols. The Venezuelan militias continue their drills. But the echoes of the confrontation that shocked the world have solidified into a dangerous new reality. We are left with a stark and unsettling legacy, a precedent written not in diplomacy, but in fire. The United States, in its campaign against the cartels, didn't just sink a few boats. It fundamentally rewrote the rules of engagement. By declaring a non-international armed conflict and treating drug traffickers as enemy combatants, it crossed a Rubicon. The legal line between a police action and a shooting war has been blurred, perhaps irrevocably. The message to the world is chilling. A nation's self-defense can now be proclaimed anywhere. Against non-state actors, it designates as terrorists, with lethal force as the first resort. This isn't just a policy shift. It's a new doctrine, one that other global powers may eagerly adopt for their own purposes. For Latin America and the Caribbean, the cherished ideal of a zone of peace lies in tatters. The region has been remilitarized, its waters now a contested proving ground. The psychological impact is profound. Trust has been obliterated, replaced by the nervous anticipation of the next flashpoint. Every go-fast boat is now a potential target. Every patrol, a potential confrontation. The most alarming part is that there is no off-ramp. The mechanism of strike and response has become institutionalized. The U.S. has invested its credibility in this aggressive posture, while Venezuela's regime has staked its survival on defiant resistance. In this tense environment, the greatest threat is no longer a calculated decision, but a simple mistake. A misidentified vessel, an over-eager pilot, that could trigger the very war both sides claim to want to avoid. The precedent of fire is now set. The Caribbean is no longer a tranquil sea, but a stage where the future of conflict is being tested. A shadow war with no clear end, fought under new and terrifying rules that the world is only just beginning to understand. The shockwaves from this clash will ripple far beyond these waters, challenging the very architecture of international law for years to come.